It's become a popular trend for the mainstream media to criticize Disney movies, especially their princess movies, saying they have bad messages and are poor role models for women and young girls. While it's perfectly fine to criticize these movies, I do feel like some of this criticism is unwarranted, and in my opinion kinda misses the point of the original to begin with, and more like the people saying them probably haven't seen these movies in a while, even openly victim blaming certain characters like Cinderella. And despite the rhetoric being overly negative, Disney has often embraced it instead of defending their works in their studio, and will even say they're using the live action movies to fix these problems. One such film is the remake of The Little Mermaid coming out soon. A lot of the marketing is disparaging the original film in order to prop up this one, like saying they fixed Ariel's character because originally she only cared about a man, or that they fixed the Eric problem because the original version was too wooden and boring. So I thought I'd take a look at the original film and explain why I disagree with those statements. So I want to start with Ariel. She's the youngest of King Triton's 7 daughters, and she's very passionate and lively. She's been obsessed with the surface world all of her life, but her father only sees humans as dangerous creatures that need to be avoided at all costs. Ariel is strictly forbidden from interacting with anything involving the human world, but that's not easy for her to do. The ocean is filled with human artifacts, largely from shipwrecks, and these ships glide over the merfolk's heads all the time. A whole other world is so close to her, but she's made to pretend that it doesn't exist, which is very frustrating for her. But all this hardlining is just making her more interested in the surface world, to the point where she'll go to great lengths to get any little scrap. We're introduced to Ariel when she's exploring a sunken ship with her friend Flounder. Despite knowing there are sharks in the area, sure enough one shows up, but instead of getting out of there, Ariel dives for a fork. But the scene also shows that she will put others' lives over her own interests, like when she drops the bag that her artifacts are in to save Flounder after he got knocked out. So even though she's willing to risk her life for what's ultimately mundane trinkets, she does have her priorities straight. Luckily they make it out unscathed, but she probably wouldn't be going to such extreme lengths if her dad would just let her pick stuff up off the ocean floor, and acknowledge the fact that the surface is interacting with his ocean whether he likes it or not. But Ariel doesn't have a safe outlet to explore her passions, so she ends up doing it in secret and getting into trouble, and it's also affecting her daily life. While Ariel was at the sunken ship, a concert is going on, which was supposed to be her musical debut. It's a pretty big deal, all of Atlantica is there, and King Triton and Sebastian have this grand entrance, but Ariel ends up ruining the show by missing her cue, resulting in Ariel getting reprimanded by her father. But I kinda think this was more Sebastian's fault than Ariel's. She was very irresponsible to miss it, but I think the others dropped the ball too. Before the concert started, King Triton said he was excited to see Ariel perform, but Sebastian says she's been missing rehearsals.
Especially my little Ariel. Yes, yes. She has the most beautiful voice. If only she'd show up for rehearsals once in a while.
So he knows that she has a pattern of doing this, but wasn't on top of it. And how did the show start without anyone knowing that Ariel wasn't at her post? Apparently he just didn't check to make sure everyone was where they were supposed to be. But weren't there crew and stagehands working backstage to keep things going smoothly? They could have at least reminded her in the morning. Wouldn't the sisters have been getting ready together? I'm just saying, they're putting all the blame on Ariel, but where was everyone else? They could have been on top of things too. Meanwhile, Eric is a kindred spirit to Ariel. At the beginning of the movie, he's sailing and expresses how much he loves the ocean, and the sailors around him tell him stories about King Triton and the merfolk, which he's very interested in. So they both have a fascination with each other's worlds. However, unlike Ariel, Eric actually gets an outlet to explore this fascination. He gets to sail and openly talk about the merfolk, and he gets to interact with the ocean the best he can, since he can't breathe underwater. But it's something. He's living his best life on the waters, but that's unfortunately not the case with Ariel. The best she can do is collect artifacts and then store them away in a secret grotto, with Flounder being her only confidant, a whole part of herself that she can't share with her family. She expresses this frustration in Part of Your World. She goes over her collection, one she's very proud of and has been working towards for years, but it's one that she has to keep secret. Ultimately, she's just really lonely, and wishes she could be free to explore her passions. It's a great insight into her character and motivations. She's very curious and seeks knowledge, and she wants to share her passions, but all this is being denied to her. A common argument against Ariel is that she's some ditzy girl who threw everything away for a man she just met, but the groundwork for her character is all laid out before she even sees Eric. She never even brings up romance in Part of Your World, and instead sings about how she wants to experience this culture, to explore and gain knowledge, instead of pretending it doesn't exist like everybody else does. She lives an unfulfilling and lonely life, which becomes even more apparent when Sebastian shows up and chastises her for having this collection, and wants to take her home. But but she notices a ship passing overhead, so she goes to check it out. It turns out to be Eric's ship, and they're celebrating his birthday. She's never seen humans this close before, and is immediately taken with the festivities. She sees them jumping and dancing just the way she said that she wanted to do herself. This is also when she sees Eric for the first time, and she's infatuated with him. Can't say I blame her. He's handsome, talented, and an animal lover. What's not to love about him? But sometimes I feel like if a female character has a crush or falls in love, people act like that's the only thing to her character, which is kind of silly. She has a lot going on and she happens to have a crush. That's not a bad thing. Eric receives his birthday present, which he's not too thrilled about. It's a statue of him in a very over-the-top manner. He probably doesn't see himself this way. He's more of a fun-loving, seafaring adventurer, but the statue comes off as very puffed up and stern. His advisor then starts pressuring him into getting married, but Eric is a hopeless romantic who only wants to get married for love, and he wasn't interested in the princess they tried to set him up with, insisting that when he finds his soulmate he'll know. Both Ariel and Eric have certain expectations forced upon them, but where Ariel has to strictly follow the rules or be punished for it, Eric is in a position where he can at least push them back for a while. Of course he has to get married, but his advisor is nowhere near as scary as Ariel's dad. Unfortunately, a terrible storm hits, which sinks the ship. Eric goes back to save the dog, but ends up in the water, so Ariel rescues him and takes him to shore. She's relieved to see that he's alive and serenades him, but the search party comes looking for him, so she quickly dives back into the sea. Eric only has a vague recollection of Ariel, mostly her voice, but the two end up becoming infatuated with each other, where Eric is constantly found searching for the mystery girl on the beach, and Ariel makes a vow to be a part of his world. Another argument people make against Ariel is that she changed her body for a man, which is very extreme, except that was never actually Ariel's intention. She was going to try to talk to Eric as a mermaid, formulating a plan of using Scuttle and Flounder to get his attention, so that way they could talk by the beach. And Eric probably would have been really excited to talk to a mermaid, considering he expressed interest in the merfolk. It was Ursula's idea to turn into a human, since Ursula has been spying on her this entire time. She's been looking for an inn to take over the kingdom, and believes that Ariel would be a good option for her, because she can sense the tension between her and her father, so she's collecting data on her to find the best way to manipulate Ariel for her own advantage. If only Ariel had a VPN to encrypt her location from Ursula. See what I did there? Yeah. This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. The internet can be a volatile ocean, full of predators willing to take advantage of you by stealing your online data, and then sell that information. But ExpressVPN gives you a shield to protect yourself from prying eyes, and it's extremely useful, especially when using public Wi-Fi, by encrypting your information to make sure your privacy is not violated. And it has other uses, like being able to access streaming services from other countries. By changing your location, you can have access to content from all over the world without actually having to travel. If you sign up using my link in the description and pinned comment, you'll be able to get 3 months for free. Thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. King Triton is excited to find out that Ariel is in love, but when Sebastian lets it slip that it's with a human, he becomes livid. He immediately seeks her out. She's gone to the grotto after Flounder tells her that he has a surprise. He somehow managed to drag Eric's statue all the way to the grotto. I have no idea how he managed that. He's a pretty small fish. But Ariel's excited to add this to her collection, but then her dad shows up, and it ends up going worse than she expected it to if her father ever found out about her collection. Triton is a very caring father, and he just wants to protect his daughter, but he goes about it in probably the worst way he can. He genuinely thinks humans are dangerous, and he believes that if he scares her straight, she'll stay away from them, so he destroys her collection in a very dark scene, leaving Ariel heartbroken and sobbing. He looks like he regrets his actions, but still thinks that it's for the greater good, and to keep her safe. But this kind of behavior is just going to push her away, and make her resentful. She already didn't trust him, and now he's destroyed everything she's been working for her entire life, leaving her more isolated and alone than ever. Ursula recognizes this, and takes the chance to approach her when she's the most vulnerable. So her eel henchmen Flotsam and Jetsam come in. They basically tell her Ursula can give her everything she's ever wanted, and Ariel initially refuses. She's been warned about the sea witch and knows that she's dangerous, so she tries to send them away, but the statue's face survived the explosions, and they swat it over to her, a chilling reminder of everything she's lost up until this point. In Part of Your World, she sings about how she wanted more than just her grotto, but now she doesn't even have that anymore. She spent her life hiding her passions and trying to indulge in them in secret. It was her only true happiness under the sea, so now she feels like she's at a crossroads. Either continue the way things were, but without her grotto making her even more miserable, or take a gamble on the sea witch, and she's desperate enough to take that risk. Even Sebastian comes to recognize this later in the film.
Just be miserable for the rest of your life.
so she meets with Ursula, who lays out the conditions of the contract. She says she can make her human, which Ariel didn't know was possible until now, but she'll have 3 days to get Prince Eric to fall in love with her and kiss her, otherwise she'll turn back into a mermaid, and will be forced to sell her soul to Ursula as payment. On top of all of that, she's going to make it harder for Ariel by taking her voice. She's doing all this to actively stack the deck against Ariel. The only thing she's after is power, by using Ariel to get to her dad. She sings Poor Unfortunate Souls, where she claims that she's changed her ways, and puts the blame of her past actions on the people that she ultimately victimized, insisting that she was only collecting a debt, and not that she set them up to begin with. But Ursula's the one who made it all about romance, and forces it to be a priority by giving Ariel a time limit. Alan Menken, who was working on the music for the remake, came out and said that they're going to remove certain lyrics from the song, claiming that they're worried it will send a message to girls that they shouldn't talk out of turn, which I don't think is giving girls enough credit. Ursula's the villain, and she says a lot of problematic things in this song. She also calls miserable, lonely, and depressed people pathetic, but she's a bad guy who doesn't actually care about the well-being of others, and she's purposely giving Ariel bad advice so she'll fail. Besides, who's watching this and thinking they don't want to disappoint Ursula? She's the bad guy. The narrative itself doesn't agree with her, and she gets her comeuppance in the end. But in the meantime, Ariel's in this desperate situation, and Ursula is promising her basically everything she wanted and more, but she questions the fact that she'll never be able to see her family again, because despite everything, she does love them, and never wanted to be completely cut off from them, even with her father's extreme actions. And we don't get a lot with her and her sisters, so it's implied that they're not very close, but she still cares about them. But Ursula's not going to give her time to actually weigh the options, and rushes her into signing, so she's turned into a human, and Ursula doesn't even bother trying to help her to the surface. I don't even think she cares if she drowns or not, so Flounder and Sebastian have to take her up. Now this was obviously a mistake on Ariel's part, but she is a kid in a vulnerable situation, and Ursula wasn't going to take no for an answer anyway. She'd been targeting Ariel for quite a while, and if this didn't work out, she would have found another way that would have been just as unfair. So Ariel's brought to the surface. Meanwhile, Eric is at the beach, and he's been going there ever since he was rescued, hoping to find the girl who saved him. He even plays Part of Your World on his flute. Max ends up picking up Ariel's scent, since they met on the boat, and leads Eric to her. Eric is initially excited, thinking she's the girl who saved him, which she is, but he rules her out once he finds out that she's mute. Thinking she's a shipwreck survivor, he takes her to the castle. It is nice that they treat her like a princess even though they don't know she actually is one, and then we get some time for Ariel and Eric to bond. I think this scene is really cute. Eric falls for Ariel, but not because of her looks or anything else that Ursula was going on about, but because he's taken with how vivacious and excited she is about everything. It's pretty obvious that Eric is also unfulfilled in his life.
Why, Eric, that's the first time I've seen you smile in weeks.
And he only really gets to be himself when he's on the seas. But Ariel's passion is infectious. She's so excited to see these new things and participate, and Eric is able to cut loose and be himself for once. And I think he really appreciates that in Ariel, which eventually culminates in Kiss the Girl, one of the other songs that they're going to change for the live-action movie. Alan Menken went on record saying that people have gotten sensitive about the idea that Eric would force himself onto Ariel, although I'm not sure how anyone could watch that scene and take that away from it. At this point, they only have 1 day left to complete the contract, otherwise Ursula wins. And Ariel has been trying to kiss him, but he keeps pulling away. He still has his heart set on the dream girl, but also he doesn't want to take advantage of her. He's been a complete gentleman this entire time, and he has no way of knowing that she's his dream girl. You know, if he can understand Sebastian, maybe Sebastian could have said that this was the same girl, she just lost her voice. Just a thought. Either way, I don't think any of this criticism is fair to the actual movie. It's the same with Eric himself, when Rob Marshall, who is directing the live-action remake, calls him wooden, and they're trying to flesh him out for the new one, which I'm not against. They can give him a mom, but I don't see why they always have to be so negative with these critiques. I think there's a lot that they're just flat out ignoring, like how the original does imply that Eric and Ariel are kindred spirits, and how they're both more interested in each other's worlds than their own, which I've been commenting on this entire time. Just because the movie doesn't outright state these things doesn't mean it's not there. They're also giving Ariel another song, where after she loses her voice, she goes around on land on her own, and sings about how excited she is, but I guess it's in her head because she doesn't have her voice. But given the time limit, I'm not sure if that's the best decision. I know they want to prove that it's not all about a man, but the original narrative doesn't support that claim anyway, despite what Disney keeps insisting. And given that time limit, I think it is good to focus on Ariel and Eric bonding, since you want this relationship to be believable. Anyway, Ursula interrupts the song just when Eric and Ariel are finally about to kiss, and laments that Ariel is better than she thought she was. She probably assumed that this was an impossible task, and she probably doesn't understand true love anyway. She takes matters into her own hands by taking Ariel's voice and disguising herself as a princess, and then puts Eric under a spell to make him fall in love with her, and forces him to set up a wedding immediately. But Scuttle finds out the truth, and they all work together to put a stop to it. Unfortunately, the sun sets just to be as dramatic as possible, so Ursula immediately starts celebrating her victory and drags Ariel into the sea, and Eric immediately goes after them. King Triton also appears and tries to break the contract, so I guess the Triton isn't powerful enough to stop bureaucracy, which kinda sucks. So Triton gives up himself in exchange for Ariel, which gives Ursula all the power. Despite this fact, Ariel doesn't hesitate to attack her. Eric also shows up and attacks her, and when Ursula tries to retaliate, Ariel grabs her again, causing her to misfire and kill her own henchmen, which they totally had coming. It's also the second time Ariel has saved Eric, and I appreciate how active and selfless she's being, even at the risk of her own life. Same with Eric. They're a good match. Eric's showing here also impresses Triton. He gets to see a human act heroic and brave instead of a monster, which helps break his preconceived notions. Ursula focuses on Ariel, wanting revenge for the deaths of Flotsam and Jetsam, which gives Eric the chance to stab her with a sunken ship, resulting in what is arguably one of the coolest Disney villain deaths. They don't do stuff like this anymore, and that's kind of a shame. But Eric was finally able to return the favor and rescue Ariel, and improved human-merfolk relations. All the souls trapped under Ursula are freed, including King Triton, and he's able to finally understand Ariel a little, and that humans aren't all bad. His sacrifice really proved how far he's willing to go for her. He then uses the Triton to turn her human. Apparently he could have done that the whole time. He probably could have used that to his benefit, even having Ariel become a human ambassador, instead of writing them off as monsters. But you know, better late than never. But Ariel and Eric are finally reunited, and they get married, which I feel like is probably just the movie wrapping up, because some people criticize that they get married immediately, but I'm pretty sure time has passed, considering the fact that the Mermaid Kingdom and the Human Kingdom are all together. But merfolk were only legends to humans originally. I'm assuming there was stuff off screen that involved human and merfolk relations, and the fallout from defeating Ursula, which admittedly I would have loved to see, but I understand wanting to skip to the happy ending, especially after all the drama in the climax. I feel like a lot of people have either not watched this movie in a long time, or are just being swept up in the narrative. There's so much more to this film than the critics are giving it credit. Ariel is a strong character. She's curious, brave, and passionate. Yes, she did make mistakes, but she's also in a pretty rough situation, and she was being targeted by Ursula for quite a while. She would have come up with something eventually, and I think Eric is a pretty solid character. He's not focused on a lot, but I would hardly call him wooden. He has well-defined traits. He's loyal, adventurous, he's a gentleman, and I think they did a good job at setting him up too. And I just don't think this movie deserves all the hate it gets. I don't think it's perfect, and it's totally fine to criticize it, but some of this criticism just misses the mark. But those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Do you think The Little Mermaid deserves all this harsh criticism? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Stutania, Tyrant Carnivore, Adam K, Shiny Orc Boy, The Rabbit Mancer, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Hussyman42, Nixel, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Caleb Nelson, Bandito Bane, Dakari the Professor, Equestron, Norman Sweetcream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Garcia XV Legend, Hunter Rose, Dash Hound, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Miranda Sinistra, Butcher7 Actual, Felix Spam, Soundboy00, Owen Wildish, Player Zero, Kitsune Fiora, Ninja Rex, Lucas Geist, Lil, Data Dine Executive, and Jay Draws. Thank you all so much for your support. If you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. You can also support the channel by leaving a like on this video and subscribing. It helps us out a lot and it's free. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way, and a link to that will be in the description. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone!